So in this video, I'm going to go over some triathlon bike setup tips that I think are often overlooked and that the research really backs us up on. Anytime we're talking about triathlon bikes, the two main focuses would be either going faster on the bike or being able to run faster off of the bike. But there's a lot of ways to skin this cat, and research can point to a few things that are often overlooked. One constant in triathlon bikes for the past decade or so has been steeper seat angles. Many bikes have gone up to 78, 79, or even 80, 81, 82 degrees of seat angle, meaning that seat tube gets steeper and steeper. This is a pretty pervasive geometry that we see on the bike. It's often referenced as a benefit because it saves our running muscles on the bike and allows them to somehow rest. And this is kind of a simplistic way to look at it. It's not entirely untrue, but it's also not entirely true as well. To back this up, there was a 2010 Journal of Sports Sciences article that showed better run performance off the bike on a steeper seat angled bike. And actually most of the benefit occurred in like the first 5 kilometers of the run. This isn't exactly earth-shattering news, and I'd agree that this is, these steeper seat angles are something that are generally accepted. But let's look at this from a different angle. It's clear that riding in the aero position with a 73 degree or 74 degree seat angle, as was tested in the study, puts our muscles in a less than ideal position to do their work. But the important takeaway is that you don't need to be riding a bike with a 73 degree seat angle in order to have your muscles and joints working at less than ideal angle. Many of the triathletes that I see in my fit studio come in with their hips and with their hands and upper body in the wrong place, really making it difficult for them to generate consistent power. The wrong placement of your saddle or your aero bars can make your steep triathlon bike act the same as a 73 degree seat angle bike. And while this type of study might make you think that erring on the side of having the saddle further and further forward is generally a safe bet, there was a 2012 study that found that having the hips too far forward for triathletes or cyclists actually increased the amount of strain across the front of the knee, for one, and upset the balance between the quadriceps and actually inhibited the bigger muscles of the hip extensor. So essentially being too far forward heaped too much work on the quadricep muscles and inhibited the hip extensors. This further paints a picture for us that in order to have a really optimal tri-bike fit, we have to dial in that saddle position and aero bar position almost to the millimeter in order to really get the biggest benefit from that tri-bike. Now, going back to just getting faster on the bike, we do want to have overall higher power for a given bike ride. But what's also important to remember is that we can ride a bike course faster but expend a lot more energy and still come out behind, right? What we want to do is ride a course either faster or the same speed as maybe we did in a previous race, but do it expending a whole bunch, if we can, a lot less energy. This is our efficiency. And so what we really need to look at is our efficiency on the bike, which is what is the cost of going a certain speed. And one way to get more efficient for race day is to simply spend more time on your tri-bike. There was a 2005 study that found that the more time we spent in our race position, the more metabolic efficiency, essentially the fewer calories we burned given a certain pace. And since a lot of triathletes do spend a significant portion of the time on their road bike, this might convince a few of them to maybe break out the tri-bike or the race setup earlier and more often in their training. Now, the last thing I want to talk about has to do with the angle of our upper body, or our torso angle, and the angle at our shoulder. Many triathletes get hung up on being too low on the front end of their bike and too aggressive, trying to get as aerodynamic as possible. Since of course aerodynamics plays a major role and is a huge emphasis that we read about constantly. But when we are too low or too long on the front end of our bike, this places extra flexibility requirements on the hips, the spine, and into the shoulders and the scapula. And in most cases, athletes will be limited in many cases, especially because we're runners, in our hip and our lumbar mobility. And so when this is the case, the shoulder has to make up this extra distance. It has to extend or flex further, essentially. So we have to make this angle between the shoulder and the torso greater in order to reach our aero bar. But a 2011 study of track cyclists really showed something interesting. It found that indeed, if we take our torso and tilt it further forward, we do improve our aerodynamic profile. We decrease the aerodynamic drag that our body is under. However, when we increase the shoulder angle, meaning we flex further and further, we actually decrease the power output that we have. And so they relate it as torso angle is related to aerodynamics, but the shoulder angle is related to power generation. And they actually recommended what they called middle ranges, which is roughly right around 80 to 95 degrees rough. And having this slightly shorter, tighter position improved power generation. And this is something I've seen quite a lot for my past 15 to 20 years of doing bike fits as a PT, because I've always found that the scapula, the shoulder blade, is actually sort of the canary in the coal mine for most bike setups, but especially on a triathlon bike. If we protract or bring that shoulder blade or flex the shoulder too much, which again then moves the shoulder blade, we upset the balance with the upper and the lower body, and we have a difficult time generating power. One of the main reasons for this is that the scapular position and the shoulder angle will affect the length of the latissimus, the lat muscle, and the serratus anterior. The lat muscle has a huge origin at the lumbar spine, so it provides a lot of stability for the lumbar spine and the pelvis. And the serratus anterior, it actually works kind of in concert with the abdominal, especially the transverse abdominis muscles. And so for both of those muscles play a major role in lumbar and torso stabilization. So just to review, steeper seat angles are definitely, a good idea. However, we don't want to go too far forward with that saddle. So making that saddle position fore aft is exceptionally important. Attain more metabolic efficiency by just spending more time on your race bike. And finally, balance the torso and the shoulder angle to get the most out of aerodynamics and power generation. So that's it for now. Thanks everybody for hanging in there. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.